G'day listeners and welcome back to another episode of the Keeper League podcast. We're the AFL fantasy podcast that doesn't talk about the superstars. We only talk about the lesser knowns and the players that are going to bring value to your draft and Keeper League teams. This week, returning co-creator of the podcast, former co-host, I guess, Kaes, welcome back to the studio.
Co-creator sounds quite cool.
Well, you were the co-creator. We created
it's true, but
we created it together.
I don't think we've ever referred to ourselves as co-creators.
Because we've always been co-hosts.
That's true.
You know, now
That's
I can't call you a co-host anymore.
I'm a special guest.
You're our special guest.
Hell yeah.
The specialist of guests, really.
It's really true.
You are on the Hall of Fame. You're the first one there, I think. So.
Yep. Me,
Apart from myself, of
me,
course.
Ben Kaes, maybe you in third.
All right, well, welcome back. What's been going on, mate? How's your off-season been? You quit the group chat, you re-entered the group chat, you've decided, you've quit fantasy, you're back in fantasy now. What's the go?
Yeah, so it's been a whirlwind over the last, 4 or 5 months. Fantasy-wise, yes, quit the group chat. Potentially, rescinded my fantasy license as well, but no, I'm back. Got talked around. Nice little couple months off just the chat, and who would have thought that I'm also now commissioner of the league? So I've gone from quitting to now running the show. So that's I don't know if that says more about me or what, but yeah, real 180.
Yeah, hopefully the commissioning job is a bit less work than the podcast, but...
potentially.
Yeah.
We'll see how we get through the preseason, but I'm happy to rule with an iron fist. So, no, back in the fold there. And then, obviously Christmas, all that kind of period has been manic. Daughter's first birthday, and I've decided to move in that time too. So it's all been happening, Hef. So this has been a nice little, time out from a busy life schedule.
It has been a busy couple of weeks. Your daughter's birthday, her little smile when we sang happy birthday was absolutely priceless.
Yeah, she loves people clapping at her, so she's obviously my daughter. Yeah.
It was good fun. Anyway, well, I guess we probably should talk about this. We made a trade.
We did.
On the other week. So
maybe the first time ever.
No, not the first time.
Oh, that's right. The first time it was Tom Jonas for Marcus Bontempelli.
We made a few. And this is another bad one that's in your favour. I traded Dunkley in his second year for Goddard.
That's right.
Which won me a flag.
That's right.
Because Dunkley went huge on grand final weekend. Mm-hmm. But, happy to have the flag in the bank, but I was pretty sad about that. So you tend to win most of our trades, Kaes.
I wouldn't say that, Hef. You're trying to get yourself out of a jinx. But yes, we did. You traded me, Will Day, who I was just kind of like, I'm happy to have a look at him as a defender. And then Hawthorn's social media, I don't know if you saw it today or yesterday, they kind of interviewed all the Hawthorn blokes and who's going to be the guy who goes bananas this year.
Is it Will Day?
And they're all like, Will Day.
Nice.
Full preseason for Will Day. And I'm like, oh, hang on, I might have actually gone all right here.
I think you've definitely won the trade long term. Absolutely no question.
Yeah. I just needed a bit of a refresh of my list.
I will explain. I don't think we actually explained it to listeners, but it was Will Day and Dill Stevens for Daniel Rich and Dyson Heppel. Mm-hmm. Now, neither of those guys, they were on the verge of my best 16, but they kind of weren't quite there because I do have quite a deep list and with some position things that are going on in our league that I have to keep some extra positions. So they weren't going to make my best 22. So I wanted the best scorers for this year because I think I'm kind of in the window. I'm probably getting a bit too far ahead of myself.
You'd be very close to premiership favourite this year.
There's 3 or 4 good teams. I reckon I finished top 4 last year. So it's around the mark. So it's about time to start making a few moves to try to climb the ranks a little bit.
I like this.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a fairly even trade. And I think long term you win, short term I think I win just. Yeah. But I didn't care about this year.
I'm more than happy with it. I was probably going to keep one of Heppel or Rich, because my backline's not too bad. So happy to part ways with one, and I'm pretty sure you're probably going to keep one, Delist one as well. So it's almost pretty similar. So
correct. Hopefully
I just a little bit of rejuvenation in my side, and never know.
All right, but we're not talking about our teams tonight. We're talking about the Collingwood Magpies.
Yeah.
Fantasy wise, they're not the most fantasy friendly team anymore. So we've got to. I know my brain often goes think of Tom Mitchell coming in. You go, well, this is going to be a fantasy feast because my brain just goes back to old Collingwood, but it's not really the way it could be. But we'll have to wait and see.
No, they're playing a bloody good brand of football under Craig Macrae.
Way more defensive, way more contested, but also way more wins.
I just find it funny that you've gone out to basically everyone in the Twitter sphere and gone, all right, you're a Crow supporter, you're a Brisbane supporter, come on the podcast. There's obviously either no Collingwood supporters out there who are in the kind of podcast world, or you just respect my fantasy advice so much that you come in, you just bring me an Essendon supporter in to talk about Collingwood.
I did need to find a place to bring you in, but also, in the fantasy world, like in the fantasy stratosphere, there's no real Collingwood supporters I could think of. Like I'm sure I'm missing someone and offending someone by saying that, but I racked my brain hard and I couldn't find any. But also we need to get you in somewhere.
It's true.
I've got another guest for Essendon, so I couldn't get you on there.
Big name guest.
Yes, so yeah,
big name guest.
Big man guest. So
basically the only bloke who would actually knock me off. I'm actually quite happy about that because usually for the podcast for the past 4 years, it's always been me talking about every Essendon game for like 4 years. So I'm actually interested to hear this guy's take.
So we won't give away the guest. You have to wait for Wednesday's episode when this comes out. But look forward to that one, that's for sure. All right, this season we're doing things a bit differently. We're separating players into undervalued, breakout contenders, and stash options. So the first one on the list is Braden Maynard. So he only averaged 72.4 last season, coming off really a breakout year in 2021, averaging 81.5. The reason for this decline was basically being forced to play as like a key/lockdown defender. Basically, it was a fullback most of the time, playing on whoever was in the full forward position. If key positions players can remain fit around him, then I think he can bounce back to being an 80-plus averaging defender. What do you think, Kaes?
Yeah, obviously you're a big Brayden Maynard fan. I was just looking through some of the stats in anticipation for tonight. Kind of crazy. He only scored 1 ton last year and 5 that year before. So just, that 2021, he was really starting to have some of those games where you're like, he was getting off the chain and getting some really cheap ball across half back. So, new coach in, a few things different. They're talking about him potentially being their next captain. So, look, I think he could continue to grow a touch, but it's going to be around that game style. And I suppose what we've seen from Macrae, I think is probably what you can get from Maynard. So, at 72, whatever it was last year.
Yeah.
I think he can push around mid-70s. I still think he's a keeper in most sides.
The issue that happened today was Nathan Kruger was seen at training with his arm in a sling. So again, I was talking about tall guys staying fit around him. That's not a good start, but still a long way to the season. So
and he was no world beater. He was more than serviceable, I thought. And they got rid of Jack Madgen as well, who can play that kind of lockdown tall as well. So if you're talking about blokes who can come in and play that defensive role, I suppose that's 2 guys down now in that area. Yeah,
it's an iffy one. He's a keeper. He's in my side. He's a keeper in my side because when we saw the back end of the season, when he did get freed up a bit, he was actually quite good, and he actually went to a few CBAs and stuff towards the end of the season. So I think they found kind of realised that they're kind of taking more away from him, playing him in that role. So yeah, we'll move on though. The undervalued, Jamie Elliott is undervalued every year. By no means an elite scorer, but he's one of our Keeper League guys. Like we used to talk about the guys who would be on the Keeper League video game cover.
Yep,
he'd be one of the guys on the cover contender. Just a handy contributor to your team. Plays up forward with stints in the midfield every now and then. Consistently gets scores in the 70s. I guess the only issue is Daicos is likely to run through the middle. Mitchell's coming to the side, likely to run through the middle. Does that kill his midfield minutes and he's solely a forward now?
Potentially. Interesting what they do with De Goey. I think they're the 2 guys in my mind who can just kind of switch and they've both got that explosive burst speed out the packs and stuff. I still think they'll throw some CBAs to Jamie Elliott when they need to try something different in that midfield. So I think I'm actually quite keen on Elliott again. Like he's 30. We've seen guys at that age, just really come into their game. And the key to him is if he stays fit. Like if he can play 20 games for this season, he's going to be really good, F3, F4 at worst. But, it's just if his body can be right, I think that's the biggest knock on him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like I'm expecting around the 70 kind of average, but like consistent 70s as well. So, yeah.
And this year it feels that forwards are more thin than ever.
Yeah,
so,
he's
someone
getting kept in our league. We know for a fact that he's getting kept in our league. No worries. So.
And I'd be keeping him if I had him. So, totally think he's in for a decent season.
On to the breakout contenders. Really like this player. Have been on his kind of team since he's been drafted, and that's Trent Bianco. He's coming into his 4th season at AFL level after finding his place in the best 22 in 2022. He played finals for Collingwood, so that's a really good indicator. Pretty versatile player, got a good leg, can play a variety of roles as well. He's listed as a forward in 2023, but I think he could find himself on a wing or a halfback flank. He's that type of player and got a good leg that they want to trust and kind of use him to distribute the ball, I think. I'm really unsure of his ceiling, but I know he had a good junior pedigree from memory. Given his forward status, I think he's one worth looking at. What do you reckon?
As a forward, yes. I was kind of a bit disappointed in him when he came into the AFL side last year. Like looking back through some of his VFL stats, he averaged 82 in the VFL. You know, put up a few games around that 100 mark, and especially a final. I think he played a final and knocked out a ton there too. So he can play that fantasy friendly game. It's just where that sits in the Collingwood side, I'm not too sure. You know, like we've got, you know, some of the guys we're going to talk about later. You know, your Carmichaels who've, you know, kind of come from nowhere. You know, the development of both Daicos guys. I'm just a little bit worried about if he's ever going to have that real meaty role, especially with guys like Sidebottom hanging on, Pendlebury hanging on. Maybe not this year, but I reckon potentially 2024 with, you know, I think the wing might suit him perfectly, and you just need Sidebottom to move out of that spot. But, you know, he had a really good season last year, Sidebottom, so it's hard to see him, you know, really drop off the cliff, and I doubt if Collingwood are in that window that they're just going to get rid of a classy player like him.
Well, you mentioned Josh Carmichael in that spiel. He's one I've actually chucked in the breakout contenders because being a mid-season draftee and he's on a year and a half contract type thing, he needs to break out this year if he's going to keep his contract. So, yeah, not really sure where to put him, but because of that, I don't think he's a stash option because, you know, if he doesn't do anything this year, if he doesn't break out, then he's not going to be a stash option. So, I guess the issue is, can he cement a spot in the side? And can it be a position that makes him a fantasy-friendly player? So in the sample, he averaged 105, midfield role. When he played for Collingwood, it was more as a forward. In that big game, when he scored like 100 plus, whatever, I don't think he even had a CBA in that game. It was mainly off, he pushed up to the contest and stuff off the forward line and things like that. So he's not the best user of the ball, but the interesting thing is he is a forward in fantasy and was a Sandful, you know, reserves fantasy beast.
Yep.
What do you reckon? If you were drafting him, where would you take him? What's the go with him?
If we were tossing up between Bianco and Carmichael, I'd be going Carmichael.
Okay. Even if Bianco has more of a chance to be in the best 22?
I think it's borderline. And like I think what Carmichael did late into that season was pretty impressive. Like from a, you know, literally a guy off the street in a way. Without any, you know, AFL preseason behind his back. But I like his actual proven stats scoring wise at VFL, SNFL level. Like he played 5 games in the VFL last year for 3 tons. And his SNFL numbers are kind of crazy. He started the year off with a 79 to 59, then went 135, 102, 107, 163.
Yeah, the big numbers.
And then 99, 98. So like for me, that's a guy who can genuinely put up big numbers. We've seen a ceiling score there.
Yeah.
So I think from a pure fantasy point of view, I want Carmichael over Bianco. And I think from what I saw last year in Shades, I think that maybe Carmichael could be just that touch ahead of Bianco.
I will go back to it though. Those VFL numbers and those Sanford numbers are playing midfield.
Yeah.
So you're saying you think he will get a midfield role at Collingwood?
I think he's more likely to have a role full stop at Collingwood.
Okay. I see him as kind of like the midfielder come forward because you can't fit him in anywhere else. Whereas I see someone like Bianco who's actually like a pretty good user of the ball, could be like a full-time wingman at some stage when, you know, someone like Sidebottom moves out, like you said.
I think this could be a real fight for a best 22 spot between these two guys.
Yeah, well, yeah, probably competing for different spots, but yeah, you know, I know what you mean. Like there's limited spots in that team. Yeah. We'll move on to the stash options. My first one is Finn Macrae. So I just don't think he can squeeze into Collingwood's midfield next season. But he's had a good year in the VFL, averaged 91.8 back there. Had some big games in terms of AFL fantasy scoring as well. Only could get 2 games at AFL level and was largely ineffective. He'll struggle to get game time, but I think he's just he's a Macrae, so you've got to keep your eye on him for the future, I think, if his brother's anything to go by. Plus, he kind of does show similar traits, just kind of seems like a few years behind, that's all.
Well, if we're going to find out it's his 3rd year this year, Heff, and we know what that means. So,
guaranteed breakout year.
And he's obviously
Sorry, I should have had him in the breakout options.
Behind me with the pipes there.
I need to rotate these pitches.
But what was I going to say? Look, yeah, his VFL numbers are really solid. You know, lots of scores just in and around that, you know, low 100s, which is really good. There's obviously some issues around his body because that's what's been coming out a bit through his preseason that he hasn't been really on the track that much. So that might be a big wait and watch.
Is there something wrong with his foot or leg or something?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what it is, but I know that he's missed a lot of preseason. So, as you said, he's Macrae. It's kind of in their blood that they just can junk it up. Look, from the small bits that we've seen in his 11 games, whatever he's played this year, in his career, I should say, there's some of that. There's some of the signs there, and he's probably one of those guys that passes the eye test, reasonably well. So
he has a stress-related back issue from December last year. Load being managed.
Hang on, is that yet to resume running?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Well, that is alarm bells, my friend.
To resume running in the coming weeks. Yeah, so that's why I've got him as a stash anyway. That's another reason why not to pick him this year. So, yeah.
Approach with caution in 2023.
Arlo Draper is another stash option I've got there. A long way off cementing a spot in the best 22 or anything like that, but classy player, can play in the midfield or off halfback flank. Good underage, fantasy scorer, averaging 101.8 in the sample under 18s. Put up a few decent scores in the VFL throughout 2022 as well. Draft him late or in your rookie list if you play that way like we do. And we'll hope for a 2024, 2025 type breakout, I think, but stash option there.
Probably haven't necessarily hit those heights at VFL level, but first year player.
Yeah.
I'm happy to give him a bit of a leeway, but I think he's a defender in fantasy this year too.
Yeah,
I think so.
I think
that's
he is too,
always handy.
He is actually
always handy to have a guy who has shown some signs with some status that's not just mid only.
But then he'll play VFL and probably lose it like Tom Phillips did for North Melbourne, but we won't talk about that one. Was it Phillips? Sorry, Will Phillips.
Will Phillips.
Sorry,
yeah,
get the
mid only.
mixed up. Yeah. Anyway, Kaes, anyone I've missed?
Well, I'll start off, we've briefly touched on, and I'm sure you've touched on a bit with the other guests you've had. Forwards are very light on this year. And I think for me, I'd just like to have a look at Dan McStay. I know you hate key forwards, but
mate, I think it's the year of the key forward.
I think it's my duty to talk about key forwards on this podcast because you won't. But if you're saying it's the year of the key forwards, shit, the apocalypse is coming,
everyone. We're going to have
everyone.
to use them. There's one in keeper potential for my team.
Is there really?
Yeah.
I can't wait to look at this later.
Plays for St Kilda. I love him.
Don't know.
Tim Memberberries.
Oh, yeah.
He's a 75 average.
That's going to get you some good scores this year.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think, McStay, for me personally, it's going to be hard to see Mason Cox play, I reckon. I reckon McStay's going to come in and take that. And when Oscar McInerney went down for Brisbane last year, McStay showed he is capable enough to be that pinch hit ruckman. I also think that Collingwood's game style probably suits McStay. He'll be able to get up the ground a bit more than what he did, I suppose, at Brisbane, where he had to share that focus with Danaher. So I think he'll kind of have the forward line to himself, which is a bit more positive. And I suppose the other guy I want to touch on, not.
Oh, sorry. Can we just keep on McStay for a second? Just kind of a few counter arguments, I guess. Now,
yes.
And I'm not neither here nor there. I don't really know, and I'm looking forward to this season. But the thing I'm considering is, was McStay a reasonably handy scorer at Brisbane because he was the third target? He didn't have the two best defenders playing on him. Usually had the third one. So did that help him? But also, as well, we know that ruck forwards are a myth. They are the worst. So we don't want them in the ruck. So that's a real red flag.
He didn't really have that many hit outs. He had 5 or 6
He had an awesome game where he was the number one ruck because McInerney went down. But yes, he is the pinch hitter. But no, I know what you mean. Like, he does score pretty well, but that's just my devil's advocate.
I love it. He takes a good grab. Yeah. I think he's a real +6 kind of operator, which I like.
If you're saying Cox isn't going to play, I think they ruck in tandem because that's what they did in the finals. Even though McStay is there, I think they kind of just want extra height or maybe even someone to stay home and be a key forward for good type thing. Let's say if Cox isn't playing, then does he take the number one defender, and that really hurts him more? I
know Grundy was the ruckman, but they got through most of last season with him. But can you really see them play like Cox, Cameron, what's his name, Myercheck and McStay? That's kind of
because Myercheck's not super tall. He's kind of like that hybrid in between. I can see him playing all three, and I can see them playing Cox as the backup, but then McStay as a stay-at-home key forward, which I like him better for that, to be honest.
Well, I think that Myercheck's not as mobile as McStay, personally.
Yeah, okay.
So I think McStay could be that, Taylor Walker lead-up style, centre-half forward.
Yeah, potentially.
That's where I'm kind of envisioning.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, so I'm just going to have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, it's just a few things to think about when you are drafting him, that's all.
I suppose the last one, Hef, it would be remiss of me not to talk about the biggest crime of fantasy in 2023. Jordan De Goey losing forward status.
Are we revisiting your argue with Freako on Twitter?
I convincingly won that argument, and I won't have it any other way. But look, being a keeper league, me included, who was now a former owner of Jordan De Goey, losing forward status is a huge killer for him. So 79 average last year, only the 2 tons. His best career average year has been 84. You can't keep someone like that as a midfielder, I don't think, especially with someone who scores so, sporadically as De Goey does. Yes, he'll get you a few hundreds, but there's games of, 37, 63, 56 in there, off 95%, 80% game time. He's a liability as a mid only, and I think the only reason you can get a hold of him, unless you're in a really, deep league where you only need to list a few people, is on the hope that he's going to get forward status back. Now, from what we've learnt from Freako in the last couple of months, do you actually see that happening?
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, I think with Mitchell coming in, I guess if Taylor Adams can remain fit, Daicos looks like he's going to play in the midfield. That might push him back forward.
Actually such a great CBA. Like,
yeah,
that's why I don't get it, because De Goey is literally forward, but they just started him in the centre bounces and then he just drift forward. Like, he actually never was really a midfielder as such. He was a centre bounce attendee.
No, he wasn't away because there was periods.
Not as much as a pure midfielder.
Yeah, you're right. He does split between forward and midfield, but it's a hard thing. The position changes purely because, like, you look at if you go to a game of footy, it's very hard to see on TV. But if you're at
they cover so much ground.
If you're at the game, every player is within a line.
They're all
like,
midfielder.
Yeah, it's the one kind of consistent way with a 66, and you can actually look at where they start and to actually make that assessment.
More my point is that De Goey's point of difference is how good he is out of the centre bounce in terms of the speed, the burst, the extraction. Like, he's actually elite at clearances. So
I know you kind of want him to get CBAs and stay in swords. We're kind of getting sidetracked, but I think he does get DPP later on. And I think, to be honest, like, he'll be an 80 average, around that mark, 80 average. Like, how good's your midfield? Like, if you're dropping an 80 in your mid-7, mid-6 kind of roles.
I don't know. Do you want me to look at my midfield?
Well, yeah, it's probably a lot better than mine. Although mine's all right this year. But
yeah, like, all right, so if we play in, like, my team, just to literally bring it up.
Yeah.
Like, are you starting to go in the middle over Macrae,
No.
Parker, Lyons, Mills, Kees, Boak?
Lyons is gone. Like,
Yeah,
he's got
all right,
OP.
we'll take him out.
Yeah.
But Parker, Mills, Kees, Boak, even, like, you could throw in. Who else is old that was injured late in the season?
I reckon him and Boak will be similar this year, around a similar mark, just given Boak's age.
Sure, and like, but that's I
and has more upside in the future.
Yeah, I don't disagree there, but like, he's kind of gone from being top 10 forward to being top 100 mid, and I think that's where you kind of really lose out with someone like him. Who's,
I agree. Yeah,
and then on the flip side, you see these Isaac Smiths who are they've basically swapped. Like Isaac Smith's just being a run-of-the-mill 80 midfielder. Now he's a mid-forward, and like, he could be a top 10. So
yeah, next year De Goey will be that 80 forward again, I reckon. So, like, I reckon he's hold on, hope for that DPP, hopefully he gets it back, but still won't be your worst midfielder in most sides.
In most sides, probably not.
I'm keeping Caldwell. Like, and he's looking like he's going to play as a tagger.
Yeah,
I'd rather
still think there's
do you want to trade?
Upside. I don't have him anymore.
Oh, who'd you trade him with?
I traded De Goey out for James Harms and Jack Gunston.
Oh, that's right, you did too.
So I needed. My forward line is absolute pus.
Needed some forwards.
I needed some forwards desperately.
I guess he's one
and
you
I
can
probably
give
still
up.
need some forwards desperately.
He's one you can give up. Anyway, we'll thank some gold members in the middle of the show here. We've usually been doing it at the start lately, but in the middle of the show here, thank you to Rory O'Brien, Jake Thresher, James Brennan, Andrew Gottlisbin, Toby Brandenburg, Danny Haggerty, Peter Kendall, Carla Copeland, Mike Warren, and Tonchi Marsadesic. That's a tricky list, that one, but I got through it. But yeah, if you are keen to support this podcast, please sign up as a member. We'll have some rankings up in early February, I think, by the looks.
Probably get started on that.
Yeah, same. So yeah, that's probably why we'll keep pushing it back until we get them done. But early February is the deadline for defenders. So I think the first week we'll try to get them up there. Also got the drafty analysis guide, the drafty analysis podcast. We've got the breakout tracker. We've got a spreadsheet up already with another one coming soon. So yes, plenty of resources there. And then throughout the year, there's lots of stuff too. So make sure you're a member so you're not missing out on those resources, but also the satisfaction that you're supporting this fantastic podcast.
Supporting Studio Head
each week. Anyway, we'll get into some listener questions. So Ninja Spoon 1 asks, who is next in line if Cameron and Cox are out in the ruck? Looking at waiver stash options if injury news comes out. Well, we mentioned McStay would probably be the option after that. I don't even know who's on their list.
Well, Aiden Begg's the other guy.
That's right, he's
but
too.
Like, he's pretty raw. And
yeah. They played him and he was a bit useless, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was a bit of a... it wasn't the worst, but if you look at his VFL numbers, played 12 games, averaged 60 points a game and only averaged 15 hit-outs a game.
Yeah.
And we know, like, it's pretty easy to win hit-outs in the VFL, like, if you're half good, you know? So it's almost a bit interesting that they didn't try and replace or get another, cheapy ruckman in.
Yeah.
In the preseason.
Well, I guess they got 3 genuine. You'd call Cox genuine, I guess, and then you've got McStay to back up if 4 go down.
Yeah, but like a lot's resting on Darcy Cameron this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Mason, like there'll be people who get rid of Mason Cox, and Mason Cox ended up being incredibly valuable. Like
If
he could be this year's.
If Cameron goes down,
he could be
or
this
something.
year's Darcy Cameron.
Yeah,
You know, like
could be actually.
You
Yeah.
know, where Darcy Cameron would have gone undrafted in so many leagues, and then
don't know if he's got the athletic prowess to get around the ground as much.
But he'd still be a serviceable ruckman if you needed, break emergency style thing.
I think I ended the year with maybe a Chol in a final as my ruckman because all mine went down.
But I think Aiden Begg, if you're looking at that, third genuine ruckman, I think he's the one. But I actually think that the Collingwood squad's kind of one genuine one genuine ruck short.
All right, Simon Evans 76 asks, do you see Josh Carmichael being the Pies' best 22 this year? We've already kind of covered this, haven't we?
I'm team yes.
And I'm team no at the start, but potential to move in once there's an injury or two. That's my take. She Perez, is Taylor Adams cooked? What do you think?
Probably.
I think he still gets you kind of like De Goey. We'll round out your midfield with an 80 or something like that if he stays fit. But he's always injured, isn't he?
He's always injured. Like I heard you talking to Tom on the Crows pod, like he's in this like Rory Sloane era of his life where it's just like, hey, he'll play and he'll probably score you all right, but like he's every chance to do his string, the next week or something like that. It's
he's only 29. So
his body's so banged up.
Yeah, that's it. He's got the body of a 35-year-old.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's been at the top of his game, he was a sensational, fantasy player, but unfortunately, he's just.
I think there's some value there. Perhaps if you had the balls, you had to take a lot of balls, but you could get him cheap in a trade.
Totally.
For someone else to build, and could get you an 80 to 90 average when he's on the park type thing. So
he's going to be one to watch the preseason, just that he's getting through it.
Yeah, absolutely. At Bego9880, what are your thoughts on Josh Daicos in 23? Does he build another strong year, and does he average 85 plus?
So he averaged 78 last year. Yep. Last 5 average of 87, put out a 125 in the final game of the year in the grand final. I think that really dug the knife into me late too. Bringing up some bad memories. What he 4 tons. Yeah, look, he's for me. He's always going to be on that wing, and that wing role is,
He did, from memory, he did boost his CBAs late in the year.
I believe you on that.
Yeah, so I can get it up very quickly, but I'm pretty sure he did go into the inside, and that kind of is the reasoning for some of his better scoring towards the end. And it actually looked like he was a player that they were going to roll with in the CBAs a lot. And then in the preseason, you have a few midfield additions, and you have one midfield addition. Yeah, last few games he had he had 0% up until round 17. And then from round 18, it was 16%, 23%, 26%, 41%, 52%, 36% round 23. Didn't have any, I'm not sure if he missed the game, but didn't have anything the first week of finals, but still had around the 20% in the semi-final, 25 in the prelim.
So for 21, 22, 23, Taylor Adams missed those games for reference.
Yep.
And they've obviously brought in Tom Mitchell, who really can only play CBAs. So that's probably where I don't see,
I 100% agree.
They're set there in terms of, crisps rolling through. They're going to start.
Yeah.
They're going to throw some CBAs to De Goey, maybe Elliott. He's probably one that he's got his role set, and what he does, when he plays a great game on the wing, Collingwood usually win. So his outside, run and tank is elite.
Yeah. And I think they need him on the outside as well. And especially if his brother goes in the middle, Mitchell comes in, he goes back out to that wing. Still think it's an 80 average. I don't think it's anything to turn your nose up as.
But he's just one of those guys who just fills in your M5, 6, 7s kind of thing.
Yeah. Correct. Most people generally have a winger and that kind of role. You got Jared Berry, your Carl Amon, you got players like that are kind of rounding out your teams anyway.
And they'll have some good games. And the good thing about Daicos is he never really puts in a bad game.
Yeah.
It's just he's actually got a really good floor. It's just that you're not getting those big
high ceiling games,
120s all the time.
All right, that's a wrap for this week. Thank you very much, Kaes, for taking some time out of your day and joining us on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure.
Well, listeners can probably expect to hear probably monthly going forward.
Monthly going forward. We're going to do obviously some rank shows as well, which I'll be involved in, and some
in
season probably once a month,
and some articles here and there too.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll be around the place. So
you won't miss him too much, guys.
No. And if you want to abuse me, just abuse me on Twitter.
You know where he's at. Yeah. All right. That's a wrap. So follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok at Keeper League Pod. Also sign up as a member to support the show. Also,
one more thing to say. Have you been warming up your hamstrings?
I have actually, but for the marmalade torp competition that's apparently happening. Yeah, we're just waiting for a date from Checkers to get it all happening. But it should be pretty fun to actually kick a few torps.
I'm gonna have to really I've got some real issues with my quad, so I'm gonna have to deep heat the shit out of that before I try and unload a few barrels.
This may be the most kind of the torp video that's been taken most seriously coming up, I reckon.
Totally.
So,
I'm gonna get a footy and go into training.
Look out for that on the socials when it happens. So Anyways, Thanks, listeners. Thank you, Kaes, and talk to you soon.
See you guys.